Okay, so let's unpack this. Why are we at this scary-looking mansion?
Yeah.
That question, it really grabs you right away, doesn't it?
It really does.
So it was straight into, talking about fear, scary things, all that stuff.
Absolutely. And for this exploration, our source is actually quite interesting. We're diving into a dialogue from an English learning resource.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's called Talking About Scary Things. And you might think, okay, language learning, but it actually gives us some pretty neat insights into how we talk about fear.
Right. So that's our mission today, basically, to dig into the language and the concepts around fear from this dialogue.
Exactly. Give you, the listener, a kind of quick but thorough look at it, and maybe some surprising language facts, too.
Cool. So where do we start? The description of the mansion.
Yeah, let's start there. It's called scary looking,
Okay.
but then it's also described as ultra spooky.
Ultra spooky. Okay.
And it's interesting how we combine words like that. So spooky on its own, the source says, means like a little scary, maybe uncomfortable.
Just a bit unsettling.
Right. But then you add ultra.
Which means what exactly? Super.
Very. Yeah, the source says super, very, really. So ultra spooky lifts it up quite a bit, doesn't it? It really intensifies things.
It does. Why do you think we layer words like that? Is it just for emphasis?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it probably reflects our need to get really specific about how we feel, you know?
Wow.
Sometimes one word just isn't enough to capture the intensity. So we add these modifiers, these extra layers to paint a clearer picture, like turning up the volume, maybe.
Turning up the volume on the feeling through words. I like that. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the dialogue says a ghost is haunting the house. What's the specific meaning of haunting?
Right. So to haunt, according to the source, means a ghost is like frequently visiting.
Not just hanging out.
No, and disturbing the people there. So it implies this kind of persistent, unwelcome presence. It's actively disruptive.
Okay, so it's more than just being present. It's actively sort of bothering people.
Yeah.
Got it. Now, you mentioned scary looking earlier. The source points out this adjective plus looking pattern.
Yes, and it's such a useful, versatile structure in English for describing how things appear visually.
How so?
Well, you take an adjective, scary, creepy, nice, crazy, and add looking. Tells you about the visual impressions something makes. The source gives some good examples.
Yeah, I saw those. Like creepy looking guy.
Right, you immediately picture something specific.
Or craziest looking house.
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds kind of fun, actually.
Doesn't it? And even something positive, like a nice-looking dog.
Right.
It just shows how flexible that pattern is for, getting across a visual vibe and the feeling it gives you.
So the mansion being scary looking immediately sets that kind of ominous tone.
Hmm.
Okay, so then the conversation shifts a bit to how the characters react to this place.
Mm-hmm. And we get some interesting words for people feeling scared. Like one character just calls the others cowards.
Oof. That sounds harsh. What's the actual definition of coward here?
The source defines it pretty clearly. Someone who isn't brave, someone who's scared of everything.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a strong label, suggests a real, fundamental lack of courage. It's interesting how we judge fear, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, and then someone says, this place gives me the creeps. Now that is a feeling I think most people recognize, that skin-crawling thing.
Gives me the creeps. Yeah, it's a great idiom for that really visceral feeling of unease, right?
Lovely.
The source says it's when something makes you feel uncomfortable and scared or nervous. It's that gut reaction. Often you can't even explain why.
Yeah, exactly. And the examples they give someone staring at you, definitely creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And, personally, clowns. They just give me the creeps. Always have.
Clowns. That's a common one. Why do you think certain things trigger that specific feeling, the creeps? Is it just unfamiliarity?
That's a good question.
I think researchers talk about ambiguity, things that seem a bit off or don't quite fit our expectations. Maybe our brain flags it as potentially dodgy, even if we don't know why.
That makes sense, like an unconscious warning signal.
Hmm.
Okay, then another reaction mentioned is getting goosebumps.
Right, I'm getting goosebumps just being here. That physical thing.
Yeah, we've all had that, surely, when you're scared or even just cold.
Absolutely. And goosebumps, the source explains, are just those little bumps on your skin. What I found neat was the mention of the Spanish equivalent.
Oh, yeah?
Chicken skin.
Huh. Chicken skin, that's great.
Isn't it? It just shows how universal that physical reaction is, even if we have different names for it across cultures.
It's a perfect example of different languages finding unique ways to describe the same human thing. Okay, one more term for being scared. Scaredy cat.
Yes, scary cat.
That feels way less serious than coward.
Totally. The source defines it similarly. Someone afraid of everything, but notes it's much more informal, maybe a bit childish even.
Yeah, like something kids would say.
Exactly. It suggests being easily frightened rather than lacking fundamental courage. It's interesting how we use different words to almost like soften the judgment of fear sometimes.
It really is. Okay, so moving on from reactions. The dialogue gets into beliefs, superstitions, specifically ghosts.
Right. And you get these two different viewpoints straight away. One character is like, nah, don't believe in them.
The skeptic.
Yep. And the other shares this personal story, this unexplained thing with a moving glass of water.
Ooh, creepy.
And it's those kinds of personal anecdotes, isn't it, that often really fuel belief in the supernatural. Why do you reckon those stories are so powerful?
I guess because they feel more tangible, more real than just abstract ideas. It's someone's direct experience, even if we're hearing it secondhand.
That makes sense. And the source connects this to culture.
How so?
Well, it points out that in Latin America, for instance, there often seems to be a stronger cultural acceptance or focus on superstitions, belief in ghosts, spirits, lots of urban legends, haunted grandma stories, that kind of thing.
Right, I've heard about some of those. It does make you wonder how much culture shapes what we think is possible, or even likely.
Absolutely. Shared stories, cultural narratives, they definitely influence how we interpret weird events. The source sort of contrasts this with Anglo countries.
Where maybe belief in ghosts is less out in the open, though it's definitely still there.
Exactly. Less overtly expressed, maybe. But then the source also reminds us, even if ghosts aren't the main focus, other superstitions are everywhere, right?
Oh yeah, Black Cat's number 13.
Don't open an umbrella inside, all that stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting how those are often framed as just bad luck, not necessarily a direct encounter with a ghost.
That's a really good distinction. It's like a different kind of thinking about cause and effect, maybe more rooted in tradition or folklore than belief in specific spooky entities. And this all leads nicely into some questions the source actually poses directly to you, the listener.
Oh yeah. What are they?
It asks, what do you think about ghosts? Are people superstitious in your country? Do they believe in ghosts?
Ah, okay. Turning it back on us makes you think about your own background and what you take for granted, culturally speaking.
Exactly. A prompt for a bit of self-reflection on how we see the unexplained. Now, just before we wrap up, the source did have that vocabulary review section.
Right, which is super helpful for learners, obviously. Pulls it all together.
Yeah, it goes back over words like creep out, chilling, supernatural, spooky, terrifying, scary looking. All those terms we've kind of touched on.
Good recap. We don't need to list them all now, but it's good they included that comprehensive review.
Definitely. It just shows how much language you can actually pull out of even a fairly simple conversation like the one in the source material.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into talking about scary things, we've seen how language lets us describe fear in different ways, different intensities.
And we looked at how people react being called a coward or a scaredy cat, getting the creeps or goosebumps.
Yeah, and we touched on beliefs, ghosts, superstitions, and how culture plays a big role in all of that.
And I guess, thinking bigger picture, language doesn't just reflect how we feel about fear, it probably shapes it too, right? How we understand and talk about the unknown. Which brings us to a final thought for you, listening.
Yeah.
Considering everything we've discussed, the power of suggestion, cultural stories, personal experiences, how much of what we actually perceive as scary or, supernatural might be shaped by our own minds, by the stories we tell ourselves and each other?
That's a deep one to end on. Definitely something to mull over, thinking about your own experiences with things that go bump in the night.